Charles,
legs this way or legs the other way?
Whatever you want to, man. Whatever is comfortable with you. I know. Just make sure we're not kicking each other.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, Charles, thank you so much, man. I greatly appreciate you sitting down with me to talk a little bit about your journey. And we're obviously in some unprecedented times right now at the time of this recording with the COVID-19 and everything. But I greatly appreciate you letting me steal some of your time. And, when you are in this type of situation in terms of things changing so fast, I mean, I know from your perspective, or I want to get your perspective, I should say, just in terms of even on the PGA Tour when you played, I mean, things changed and you had to adjust. What was that like? Say if there was a rain delay or, a tournament gets called, how does that affect you?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of know there's things you can control and things you can't control. And obviously this is a dynamic situation that seems like it changes hourly. So, I mean, when you look back at where we were 4 or 5 days ago, it was completely different than now. The only things that I can really compare this specific situation to would have been like when Payne Stewart passed away. I remember where I was when that happened, and we had some delays. I think we delayed for a day because of his funeral there, and then obviously 9/11. I remember Jonathan Bird and I were rooming together at a residence inn in Eugene, Oregon at the Nike Buy.com event or whatever it was at the time, and it was, he was getting up to play the Pro-Am that morning and came into my room and told me what was happening. And, similar to this, I mean, we were just kind of figuring that out on the fly. So at one point, I remember, I think there was probably 8 of us that lived on the East Coast that were figuring out a way to rent a van and just make it all the way across the country, because we didn't know, kind of like this, when the end was going to be or when we would play again. Obviously, I think, we played the next week in Boise, Idaho, which was a little surreal, but there were just a lot of unknowns, and I think this is, the same kind of situation. But, from a golfer standpoint, there's just things you can't control, like weather and things like this. The uniqueness to this is that just nobody knows what the end is going to be. So from a preparation standpoint, I don't really know what players are really doing. I mean, they know they've got off through Augusta, so that's, kind of a 3 or 4 week break. And obviously the players that were really hot coming into the Players Championship, that'll all kind of reset, and then whenever they do get to come back and play, it'll be kind of a new world.
It definitely will. And so now, how did you guys get back to the East Coast then?
So we ended up playing. So the tour took that week off. I think that was actually the week maybe of the Ryder Cup, and then I think the tour. I don't know if there was an opposite field event, but as far as the Nike tour was concerned, we took the rest of that week off. Just practiced and kind of hung out and just kind of figured out what we were going to do or how we would potentially get home. And then I think maybe on the weekend, the tour announced that we were planning on playing the next week. So we just proceeded and went to the next week. And it was, definitely, like I said, surreal playing after all that happened, which it'll be kind of the same way with this.
I think that's right. And that was a crazy time. I was actually in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
When the Pentagon was hit that morning. I was actually probably only a mile and a half or so away from the Pentagon.
Wow.
And obviously didn't know what was going on. I mean, it was just craziness trying to get all the reports that were coming in. But we were in the bottom floor of a hotel, basically. So you really didn't know what was going on. But then when you went up to the street level, I mean, obviously all the sirens, just everything going crazy. And then it was, okay, now, how do I get home?
Right.
So we had a group of us that we were trying to rent a car, couldn't rent a car because everything was shut down. You couldn't get to the airport or any place. And then some of the rental places outside of the airport, they didn't have any cars.
Sure.
We rented a U-Haul. A 28-foot U-Haul.
You got to figure it out.
And you should have seen as we threw our suitcases in the back of it. I mean, it was so cavernous, and you had 3 suitcases back there. And so we just took off, and I got pulled over for speeding.
No way.
Yes, on the interstate. There was nobody on the interstate. And I remember there were like 6 cop cars that came after me while I was driving, because nobody knew. I mean, they see a U-Haul truck just going 80 miles per hour down the highway.
Yeah.
So that was a comical experience, but it was, talking about surreal.
Yep.
I was like, man, this is just a whole new world. And I think it's to that same point, I can only imagine just what it was playing. I mean, how to be focused when knowing there's still such uncertainty in the world at that time.
Yeah, well, I think that, anytime something like this happens, I mean, it's a perspective check. I think everybody puts things in perspective. I mean, last Friday, we were really hoping to have the Players' Championship to watch the rest of the weekend. And it was, I got to be honest with you, I'm not going to say I watch a ton of sports on television, but it has really been weird not having anything to watch, or you flip it on SportsCenter and I mean they don't have anything to talk about.
At least sports is just something you at least have on in the background.
That's exactly right.
Whether you're engaged in it or not, it's comforting to know that just something's in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the ripple effect of all this is not going to be known for months or even years after, but. When you look at the tour specifically, I think about the caddies, I think about the sponsors, I think about the charities that are impacted each week by all these events. And I think Jay Monahan knocked it out of the park this week with the way he handled things. And I think you'll probably see sponsors for that period that they have to sit out really step up and partner with the local communities and do some of the things that they were probably planning on doing as it was. If the event had gone on as planned. So I think it'll, there will be some positives and some silver linings to come out of this. It's just really difficult to see right now.
It is. Well, and that's what's so hard. Everybody wants to be able to predict what's going to happen. And that's, obviously what's dominating the airways, at least on sports talk radio, is they're wanting to have this crystal ball and the what ifs, but you can't. It just seems to be changing every single day.
That's right.
Now, you talked about that you might not watch a lot of sports necessarily right now. Hey, you're a busy guy, you're a dad, so that is a hard...
I'm a golf and a college football guy.
Yeah. That's easy, right?
Yeah,
well, we're both Clemson grads, so we've been very blessed over the past, decade or so. But what about you just in terms of when did that love then of golf, football, whatever, when did that happen? What was your kind of first memories of growing up loving sports?
Yeah, I think when I was a kid, I mean, that was just, and I've got a 13-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter, and I think it's, when I was a kid, we were outside playing some sport until dark just about every night, and, I just think you're exposed to it that way, and that's just kind of how I was raised. And then I would say when I was probably 12 or 13, started to play golf a little more seriously, and then got competitive, I would say, through my middle teen years. I wasn't really a highly recruited high school player coming out of high school, but, so really got serious about it kind of towards the end of high school. And then at Clemson, I would say I really started to develop where that interest in actually doing it long term kind of came about. But ironically enough, from a football standpoint, I mean, my dad was a cheerleader at South Carolina. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. All of my family went there. And
that's
so
Gamecock Nation.
It was an interesting conversation to be had with the whole family when I decided to play golf at Clemson. But quite honestly, in that generation, if you had the chance to play golf at Clemson, loyalties aside, it's just kind of what you did.
Now, why is that?
I just think Larry, the kind of the reputation of Larry and the program he had built was of such to where if you had a chance as a junior golfer in South Carolina to be a part of that, it's just kind of. It's kind of what you did. It's kind of what you did, and I think you kind of saw that through the late '90s, early 2000s. You just had a lot of players that were just wanting to come play, and it's definitely proud of what Larry and everybody's done there for sure.
Now, could you have played at South Carolina? Did they
I could have
offer
played
you?
at South Carolina, so I was recruited by like Wofford and Furman and South Carolina and Clemson and maybe a few other schools on a very small basis, but. Like I said, I was not one of the more highly recruited players coming out of high school.
Yeah, but you had great success as a junior golfer and in high school.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, when I came out was really the beginning of the AJGA and kind of when high school players, and now it's at a whole nother level, which is a whole nother conversation about why kids are so much better now coming out of high school and college. But, I didn't really play any of those national events, so I really didn't have a barometer to compare myself to a lot of the kids in other parts of the country. So, winning Southern Cross and the state tournament and all of those kinds of things were great. But, at the end of the day, that was kind of the beginning of all these coaches having access to a comparative kind of way to look at all these players across the country or now all over the world.
Yeah, so what's so different than now, what you're talking about in terms of being able to compare yourself to national golfers?
So I think, you can fact check me on this one, but the number that I've heard is that in the last 15 years to 20 years, the average age of a PGA Tour player has dropped like 7 to 8 years. Now think about that. That's
7 to 8 years?
That's a statistical aberration over all of time for something to move that quick. And, what I think, it's the Tiger factor. So the kids that were influenced and got involved with the game because they looked up to Tiger and they started working out at an earlier age. They started working with sports psychologists. They started working with instructors. These kids were doing all of the things at that age at 12, 13, and 14 that we didn't do until we were 4 years out of college. So I think you're seeing, technology is a big part of that too. I mean, TrackMan and all these things, these kids have access to.
And even the clubs themselves.
They have instant access to data that tells them yes or no. There's arguments for that being good and some arguments for that being bad, but when it's all said and done, I think that's the biggest factor, is these kids are just doing all the things that we didn't do till we were on tour. I mean, you look at my generation and just the one before me, and you got guys like DeMarco and Toms and Duvall and, Stuart Sink. All those guys won on the Nike Tour before they ever thought about thinking they could win on the PGA Tour. You had a Phil and a Tiger that were true aberrations to the generation, but if you look at it, now these kids are coming out of even high school thinking they can win on tour. And it's mind-boggling to look at where I was at that age.
And is that unrealistic for them to think that they could win on tour?
No, because they're doing it. I mean, they're doing it. Jordan Spieth's doing it. Rahm's doing it. These kids are winning. Justin Thomas, I mean, somebody was, these kids they're 24, 5, and 6 years old, and they've won, a half a dozen times on tour. It's really kind of crazy what's going on. It's great for the game. I think it's great for the next generation. It's going to be great for, kind of sustainability of the product, because at the end of the day, Tiger's not going to be competitive forever. But I think it's everybody's loving how this is all playing out, with Tiger becoming competitive again and getting healthy and doing the things he's doing. Then you got a bunch of these young guys that are, putting their name in the hat as well. So it's a fun time to watch golf. Hopefully we get to do it again soon.
I know. Well, golf seems to be on a trajectory just in terms of viewership and just excitement because of some of the things that obviously you talked about with Tiger. I mean, I know that's a big part of it, but there's a whole other generation that you're describing that is good and really good, and being able to draw some people in. Now, you mentioned that you felt there was good and bad with some of the technology. What's some of the bad?
So I think, I don't think it's any surprise. So I think the good is that, you can quantify so many things. You can quantify spin rate. You can quantify launch angles. You can quantify your putting stroke. I mean, there's all these different kind of litmus test tools that it's either yay or nay. At some point, the fact that it's a sport and you're out there competing as an athlete gets lost sometimes. And I think, Bryson DeChambeau's at one end of the spectrum, and then you got a guy like Bubba Watson that's at the other end of the spectrum. So, I think that kids have to, at some point, take all that data, process it, but when they go out there on the golf course to compete, just go show off.
Yeah.
Just go do what you do.
You still got to perform.
The work has been done. I just think the whole paralysis by analysis thing.
I was about to say the same thing. It has to be a factor at times.
It is, and I think one of the things that these coaches do, the really good coaches, I think they identify that, and what they do is they filter all of that information for these kids, for these players, so that they can basically summarize it down to something that's manageable, so that when it's all said and done, it's like, all right. We've worked for a couple of days, you're heading to a tournament tomorrow, you're buttoned up, you're ready to go. These are your one or two small things that you're going to focus on while you're playing the tournament. Then when you come back, we can digest the rest of it. And I'll plead that I'm as guilty as any of that, because, you start looking at all this and start comparing your numbers and comparing these things, and, it's easy to get lost in that. So I think that's what the good younger players are doing, like Ricky and Justin and, all the rest of these kids. They really do a good job of just going out there, and when they're on the golf course, they're just showing off. They're just showing off their athletic skills, and they're not thinking about all these numbers and things.
Yeah, well, and I think you're spot on just in terms of also the athleticism. I mean, we've seen guys now bigger, faster, stronger, and we're in the same generation. I've got you by a few years, but even just looking at, I'm a big basketball guy, and watching the slam dunk competition now, and I'm a big Michael Jordan guy. I mean, I still think he's the GOAT. Sure. And just watching the slam dunk competitions back in the late 80s and early 90s, I mean, at that time, those dunks, those were impressive.
Right.
But now, they're pedestrian compared to what these guys are doing in the NBA now with the slam dunk contest. I mean, it's just amazing.
It really is. And I mean, I just talked about golf. If you started expanding this and extrapolating the impact of technology on all of sports, I mean, it's mind-boggling. It really is. I mean, you look at, I guarantee if you go look at the combine numbers for the NFL, and if you look at, pitch speed, if you look at all of these types of metrics, I mean, players are becoming more athletic and they're pushing themselves. I mean, go look at an NFL game from the 70s or 80s. They don't look like these guys do.
No.
It's just a different world. And I think, fitness is another thing that's been highly, highly impacted by the ability to, 3D kind of analyze bodies and motion and speed and all those things, and sequencing. TPI, Titleist TPI, that was really my first introduction to it out in Carlsbad. I mean, they had the first kind of golf platform to where they could hook you up to all these sensors and monitors and basically break you down like literally one motion at a time. And that's kind of the world that we live in now. I think all athletes are looking for an edge because, the whole analogy of like a race car going 190 to 190.1 is all the difference in the world in sports. I mean, it's just
it does make a difference.
It's fine tuning. So it's interesting to watch it develop, but the stat of how much younger PGA Tour players are now is amazing.
I didn't realize that. Yep. That is definitely significant. Now, how much did you have to fine tune your swing versus just a natural swing that's just God gave you that talent to swing a golf club?
I would say my ball striking was never something that there were times where I tried to overhaul it where it needed no overhauling, but my short game was really the focus for me. So that was really, chipping, putting, bunker game. Those were the places that I really, when I was playing out there and working on it, those were the things that I tried to focus on. I'm not going to say that I probably did hit more balls than I probably should have, but my ball striking was always good enough to compete, but short game was definitely the focus of kind of where I wanted to make progress. And I'm not going to say I wasn't that I was an awful putter. You can't really play out there for a number of years without being
to a certain degree.
But I would say that nowadays, if you look at these statistics, there are very few to no players in the top 50 in the world that are have an average short game and great ball strikers, but there's quite a few of conversely the opposite. Guys that hit it okay, that their short games really just carry them. It's just, the game has gotten to where, and stats, you hear all these stats now that driving stats are much more important than they used to be. I'm not so sure that's true. I don't think you can hit it good enough to score good enough to be competitive at really any level.
What were you averaging drive-wise?
I don't even remember. It's been so long since I've looked at it. But I was, total driving was my stat. I laugh at myself. I think I'm the only player in the history of the PGA Tour to lead the tour in total driving and ball striking and lose my job, which is pretty crazy. But I was always in the top 2 or 3 in total driving, top 15 in distance, and ball striking. My greens and reg was always, top 10 or 15. But like I said, those 2 stats don't add up to the only stat that matters.
That's right.
Which is the dollar sign.
W's, right?
That's right.
Yes, to get those dollar signs.
That's right.
Okay, I got to go back, though. In your childhood, your dad obviously is a huge Gamecock fan, and you're telling your family you're going to Clemson.
Yep.
But now, were you going to Gamecock games as a kid? I mean, was it?
So I went. I've probably still been to as many games in Williams-Brice as I have at Clemson. Probably, maybe not quite. I've probably passed that, but it was. It was one of those things. I remember going through the process. I don't really remember how it played out, but I didn't make the decision to go to Clemson until June, the beginning of June before I went. I mean, now these kids are committing when they're sophomores in high school. But I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I think it was kind of down to Furman, Wofford, and Clemson were kind of the options. I would say the decision to get out of Columbia was really more predicated on just getting out of where I grew up.
Yeah, just wanted to do something different.
Going to college. But, my parents were super supportive of whatever I did, and I think that was, that was the theme of the process is no matter where I decided it was going to be, it's going to be one of those things to where they were going to support it. And, they obviously did, and it obviously worked out, so.
Yeah, so there wasn't any contention in the household?
None at all.
Well, you're getting a golf scholarship, right?
That's right.
So,
none at all.
And what was it like then when you get to Clemson in terms of the transition? You mentioned that you weren't necessarily highly recruited, But did you see a big difference in level of competition once you got to Clemson?
Yes, I did. It was overwhelming, to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean,
in what way?
So, I go in, so we had an apartment my freshman year, and I go in and I'm rooming with a kid from Ireland that just came off a redshirt year that was obviously going to play on the team, and 2 AJGA Junior All-Americans. So obviously I didn't have the pedigree. I came in kind of needing to prove myself. I redshirted my first year, and I think that was the best thing that I could have done. Obviously, balancing school and athletics your first year is just extraordinarily difficult. And it's one of those things that if you're not prepared for it and you try to go play, I just don't think you could possibly have the time to do it with travel. So I redshirted my first year and, kind of came into my second year wanting to prove myself. And, I would say I had an okay freshman year. I played a little bit, maybe had a couple of top 20s. And then my sophomore year, I would say in the fall is kind of when I started to click and started to really progress. And, I think that I really can't pinpoint exactly what that was other than actually,
I was going to say, what was there a defining moment that, all right,
if you look back on it, and
you
have to kind of put something as kind of the turning point. I went to, I think it was probably the second or third tournament in the fall. We went to Houston to the tournament at the Woodlands, and I literally in the practice round, I couldn't make it from here. No joke. I mean, it was bad. I was in a panic, and that was at the time to where of all these putting styles and things that have kind of progressed since then. That was kind of the beginning of the cross-handed movement. And Larry and I were on the putting green. I remember it was just the two of us that night, and he's like, why don't you try cross-handed? And I went to cross-handed, and it just kind of felt natural.
And it just fit.
And I played okay that week, and, had a good spring, and then obviously my last 2 years played really well. But I think if you were to look back on it, I think that would be the turning point. So,
because that just gave you some confidence overall?
And sometimes it's just you need to do something different just to kind of mix it up. And that's kind of the phase that I was at with that. It was that bad. Yeah.
How are you guys getting selected to which tournaments you're playing? I mean, what's that process like at Clemson?
We laughed that Larry used to use the point system. And the way the point system worked was you, and you are going. But, in all honesty, I think that, Larry had a good handle on it. Some teams, we would qualify for a spot or two, and then he would pick 3 guys. But, it was kind of week to week, depending on, if you were coming out of the summer or off the winter break, when everybody was kind of like I was talking about with these guys these days, kind of resetting, then you might have 3 or 4 qualifying spots. But, I'd say the guys that were always 1 and 2 and 3 even were always kind of guaranteed to travel. But, he always kept it open to the rest of the team from a competitive standpoint to work your way in, which was the phase that I was at, I would say, up until my junior year.
What was the home course?
We played at, they built the Walker course when I was there. We played at Boscobel a bunch. We played at Cross Creek a bunch. And then when they built the Walker course, obviously we were out there a good bit.
Yeah, but now as the Walker course, does it host tournaments?
No, they don't.
Why is that?
Yeah, so, I think there's a variety of factors. A lot goes into that. And I think that, so they host a tournament at the Cliffs and at the Reserve now. So they have a kind of I think it's a week before and week after where they have the girls host a tournament and the guys host a tournament. But I just think that you've got to, these days the golf course has got to be such a challenge to be competitive because these kids, like I said, are just so good. So they've picked a couple golf courses on the lake there that are close by, and they can obviously engage and incorporate Clemson with some of the events that surround the tournaments. But I think that's
so the Walker course is just not challenging enough the way it's set up.
I think if college kids went out there, they would shoot nothing. I think they would destroy it. Just because it wasn't built for that. It was built to be a community public golf course that the whole community and the student body could enjoy. And I think that was the goal. And I think that's the purpose that it serves. So I think they would struggle to make it difficult enough for a championship event like that.
So what makes a golf course difficult? Because I hear this quite a bit in terms of obviously. The different courses around the world. What makes it difficult?
You ask a bunch of experts that, and they're going to give you a bunch of different answers. My opinion is that obviously narrowing the fairways, thickening the rough, making the greens firmer and faster, all of those things make the golf course more difficult. But at the end of the day, you got to have a design that leads itself to, kind of making 1 or 2 of those things kind of the influencing factors that still keep and incorporate the kind of the traits and characteristics of that golf course. There's just golf courses you just can't go in and do all 4 of those things and expect it to play right, which is a lot what you're seeing with a lot of these professional tournaments is they try to reverse engineer a score, and that just doesn't work out. So I think that if you were to take Chanticleer or some of the other golf courses around here, that Chanticleer is a good example. So, they've had 2 or 3 state AMs there, and when they get the greens firm and fast with a little bit of rough, I think it plays well, and it's under 7,000 yards. And, I think Bill Haas shot 8 under when he won the state AM out there. So, there's golf courses that can handle 1 or 2 of those things, and then there's ones that can handle all of them. I just don't think, I think the Walker course specifically, you'd struggle to keep the playability of the golf course with greatly narrowing the fairways and growing the rough up. And then,
well, no, they don't need to do that because I love the Walker course.
You wouldn't want to see that. You'd be miserable. You'd be miserable.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah,
and I don't need to be miserable with golf. Right. I'm not that good.
I think the game on a whole is going more towards being faster, being more casual, being more fun, being more playable. I just don't think for 98% of the golfing population that it serves a whole lot of purpose to do any of those things.
That's right. No, I'll leave that up to the pros.
That's right.
You can handle that. Just give me my fun experience out there, because I don't get to play enough either.
Right.
That's the other side of it.
Yep.
How often were you playing? I mean, were you playing every single day as a student or even, on tour? I mean, how much break time did you have?
I mean, it's different now because they have the wraparound schedule, but so in college you'd play 4 tournaments in the fall and 7 tournaments in the spring. So you'd basically have off December and January, basically.
Yeah, but were you hitting every day? I mean, were you going out there and practicing?
Something. I mean, you're doing something. I mean, there were times where you take breaks. I mean, in December and January when the weather's bad, you kind of got to get away from it. But I mean, you're always doing something. I mean, it's a big part of your college experience as an athlete is, everything you do, whether it's, hitting balls or playing or whatever, we're doing something for sure.
What was that like, though, to win the NCAA championship?
Yeah, I mean, that now that my golf career is behind me, that's definitely.
Yeah, have you been able to really reflect on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the defining moment. I mean, that's obviously the thing that I identify and people identify myself with and I'm definitely proud of that. I mean, that was. At the time I had a good year that year, and going into NCAAs, I liked the golf course. I mean, nothing happened prior in that week or in the weeks preceding that would have really led me to believe that was a reality. But it was a fun week. And
so you didn't have this extra confidence boost going in?
I would say the final round I did. Things just happened the final round. I was making a lot of putts, and it was obvious to me that things were going and were going to go really well that day. It was a windy day, and I just played well, and at the end of it, had a lot of good breaks and things that happened to go my way, and Jason Gore still holds it over my head that he doubled the last hole to miss the playoff and put Brad Elder and I into a playoff. But,
so he thinks he would have beat you if he makes the playoff, right?
But anyway, it's all water under the bridge, but it's all fun banter when we see each other, and then, but yeah, it was.
How much were nerves affecting you during that, when you're that close, when you feel that I'm really in contention here?
Yeah, I don't
especially in the playoff hole.
Yeah, the playoff hole, definitely there were some nerves, but I just think, I think when you're in the situation, you're controlling it, and I think that's one of the things that, I think as an athlete, the nervous times are the night before, or the other times when you're leading up to it. Like the most nervous you are is, I remember when I won my first pro event at the BMW here, the night before is the worst part. I was leading by 3 or 4 or 5 shots, and that's the worst part. When you get to the golf course and you're actually in the moment, it's what you do.
Because you feel natural.
I mean,
you're in your environment.
You want the ball. You're in the environment. You're just reacting to whatever the situation presents you. So, I don't, were you nervous? Was I more nervous than I was in the 3rd round? Sure. But I don't think it really, you got to love the situation. And at the time, it was great. I mean, you look back on it and wonder how, as a junior in college, you got it done, but somehow I did. So it was good. And then, obviously my senior year was a lot of fun as well.
What was your typical routine just for any tournament? I mean, you have a certain, this is what I do every single time, or, did you have any type of superstitions or anything?
Well, it's actually an interesting question because in college it's dictated upon what Larry told us to do. I mean, it's a team thing. First tee time, I mean, we basically dictate,
which is different.
Which is totally different.
Yeah.
And it's not to be shied away from conversation when you get out of college, because now, you go from having a coach and 4 teammates that usually in most situations you're all buddies and you're all pulling for each other and you're, all helping each other and helping when, take a look at my swing and tell me what you think kind of thing. And then you go and now you got a caddy, and that's about the only person you got on your team that, unless you engage in sports psychologist or instructor. So, then all of your time you go from having school and all of the other kind of requirements of you as a student athlete to now your entire day and life is dedicated to being a successful athlete. And it's an interesting transition, to be really honest, which is another factor why I think these younger kids are more competitive, because they even are doing those things before they get to college. But then you've got to basically manage your day, manage your travel, manage your prep, manage how you invest your money into yourself. But, I would say, so if you were to ask me what my average day is in college and after college, it would be completely totally different things. But, I think that we practiced, and, I think we had a good fraternity of guys once we got out of Clemson that, on tour, guys to play practice rounds with and kind of at least kind of transition kind of somewhat similarly to college. But, it's a totally different world when you got 24 hours to dedicate to doing what you need to do.
Yeah, so when you're on tour, either the Nike or PGA Tour or the Nike at the time,
Korn Ferry now.
Yeah, Korn Ferry now. Were you having to take care of all of that? I mean, all your travel, you're doing that, hotel, everything.
Yeah, it's, you've got an agent. My agent helped me kind of organize all that. But, I'll never forget that I was playing, so I get my PGA Tour card and I'm playing the Sony Open, which was obviously 5 hours behind the East Coast, and my accountant called me, and I'm playing my first tour event as a member ever, and my accountant calls me and tells me my quarterly taxes are due in like 2 days. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? So, things like that you need people to kind of keep you in line, but, there's just a variety of things that you just don't think about, as a college kid coming out playing golf that you're going to have to deal with. But, you've got an agent. PGA Tour Travel has a travel agency that was really good about, if you missed a cut, helping you change flights and whatnot. But, it was, you're doing all that on your own. You're an independent contractor, and, you're running a busin's, and I think that's what, I think a lot of these kids once
Charles
again are
Warren
doing.
Incorporated,
You're running a business, and I think that's definitely a learning transition.
Yeah, and once you get your card, or either tour, are you able? I mean, you're selecting which tournaments you want to play in. Obviously,
when
unless
you're young,
there's
you're going
one.
to play anything they'll let you in.
Yeah.
But absolutely. I mean, you can't. I would always say that 5 or 6 weeks was about the max that I was comfortable really playing in a row. And I mean, that was a lot. But you've got to make those decisions, and those are things you just got to learn what you're capable of. What your body and mind. Honestly, the mind part of it is the primary piece. When you're a young kid out of college, physically you can go out there and walk 18 holes, 5-6 days a week for 6 or 7 weeks in a row. Mentally, though, it's draining, and you've got to find time to reset. But you've got to lay all that stuff out. I think, at the beginning of the year, I think most of the players kind of lay out what their schedule is going to look like, knowing that if you're not fully exempt and you're not in all the majors and World Golf Championships and whatnot, that's a fluid kind of schedule and things can change. But it's all factors that you have to work through.
Well, I was fortunate to be able to play in the 2018 BMW Pro-Am, that charity event, and I could not believe on the final day I was mentally toast.
Yeah.
Just completely toast.
Yeah.
Just from their perspective, and to your point, not even so. It wasn't so much the walking, but it was just so much of that you're having to mentally prepare for each shot.
That's right.
And day after day. I mean, it's just I couldn't believe how I was like, I need to sleep for a week.
Yeah, and
not even just from the physical side.
And the rounds in a tournament like that, I mean, they're 6-hour rounds.
Yes.
So you're out there for a long time. And obviously you're engaged, you're having conversations. It's not like you can just check out and sit on a bench and park it for a little bit.
And then for me also, I'm on and I'm under the pressure of what I want to do well, and I'm not that good of a golfer anyway, so it's even extra pressure. I can't even imagine now you're having to compete for your livelihood.
And honestly, the irony of it all is the weeks that you're playing well and you're in contention, I don't know that there's no way to ever measure this, but you expend so much energy in the weeks that you miss the cut by a shot and you're struggling and you're fighting it. I mean, those are the weeks where you really get tired. When you play good, it's like, that was easy. Why don't I do that all the time? It was easy.
That's right.
So I think maximizing kind of that return on your time and your energy is yet another thing to kind of factor in. But it can wear on you.
Now, were you a workout guy? I mean, were you doing any of that?
To be honest with you, nobody started working out until, I would say, when we were in college and Tiger started to Norman was the first guy to really get people thinking about actually making golf an athletic sport and working out and doing those things. And then Tiger obviously took it to a whole nother level. But, I would say until, if I look back at it, I would say until 4 or 5 years out of college, so 2001, 2 or 3. I mean, those were kind of the first times that you really, I'm talking about really working out. Titleist, like I said, formed that TPI platform that has grown significantly. That was kind of a good base for all of us to kind of go and say, all right, we're here. Let's try to at least get here. Tiger's up here, but we need to at least work towards, maximizing what, we're physically capable of doing, and I'm laughing at myself as I say that. So, but it's that was it was always an evolving thing.
Yeah. How often do you now look though at? Talked about the technology and how it has changed. I'm talking just from the clubs themselves and balls. And do you think, man, if I would have had that technology, I'd still be playing?
Well, imagine what Nicklaus and those guys think.
I know.
I mean, you look at it. I mean, all of it is just kind of crazy. And I don't, obviously I play 10 times, 12 times a year probably for the last 7 or 8 years. So I've kind of gotten away from it. Yeah, I don't, I'll play a couple of tournaments and I might play another 10 rounds, call it 10 to 15 rounds a year. I'm just, it's just not.
Is it because it's not?
Well, it's not a
focus.
Obviously,
it's not a priority anymore.
Business doesn't, kind of dictate that I have a whole lot of free time to do that. But the other kind of factor is on the weekends. I'll take my son out and play some, but for me to tell my wife I'm going to go burn 5 hours on the golf course on the weekend,
that's tough.
Recreationally, it's just kind of like, why would you do that? I love to hunt and fish and do those things. So it makes a lot more sense for me to kind of carve that time out to do something like that. But I do envision kind of getting more back into it. I would say in the next few years, Charlie's 13 years old, so as he starts,
is he picking it up?
Yeah, so as he starts to play more, I'll definitely get more involved, and hopefully my daughter Riley gets involved.
What about her?
And I think that I think there's an interest there. So I don't push it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that dad, but from an equipment standpoint, it's really kind of nuts what's going on. The equipment has gotten so good, and obviously there's a lot.
I say bring it on.
There's a lot.
I need more help.
Well, see, my thing is USGA obviously has got this whole focus on trying to figure out where technology and all these things are going. My thing is personally, I would rather go watch Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka hit at 380 versus 300. It's just pretty simple. To grow the game and make it more interesting, who really cares if they shoot 40 under? It doesn't really. I think you got to keep it to where it's fresh and exciting. And I understand that the delta kind of is going to eliminate a lot of players as the longer players get that much longer. But I don't think you need to do too much limiting. I think they do need to rein it in somewhat. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens with all that.
So why do you think there's a certain aspect of golf traditionalists that don't want to see guys hitting it 380 or 400, or I see a lot of the times, oh gosh, this major, you can't have somebody finish 15 under at this major.
Yeah, so I think that's the big thing. I think that's the big question is they see the scores and they see these things and they want to, it's more golf course related. The fact that these guys hit at 350 consistently, and they're hitting less club into these greens, it's obviously just a numbers game from that point. But I think when you look at it as a whole, Augusta is obviously the one consistent golf course through all the majors. So you look at Augusta and you look at some of these things, and the problem is they look at it and say, well, these guys are shooting 15 under and winning the Masters. Well, we don't want that to happen. Well, I understand that, but at the end of the day, I think they need to reduce it more to the playability of the golf course. So, they'll use examples like, well, Hogan used to hit 4-iron into this hole. Well, he hit 4-iron into that hole, but you're not factoring in the agronomy advances that they've made The greens were rolling 6 then, now they're rolling 15. So the golf ball literally won't hardly stay on the green.
It'll just
hitting a long iron into a green.
off.
So you got to there's a lot of different factors, and the problem is they all try to boil it down to score. What was the winning score, and we want to protect the golf course, which, I agree there needs to be an aspect to that. But they've done it. Augusta gets everything pretty much right, and they've done a great job of kind of reining it in with basically the same golf course that they've had for a number of years. When you start to look at some of these other golf courses and the rotations through the other courses with the majors, you start to see that, there's golf courses like Marion and golf courses like that are going to struggle to kind of keep up with this whole technology advancement. But once again, they did it last time. So it kind of goes back to that whole conversation about how do you make a golf course playable but yet more difficult.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of varying opinions on that. My thing is, let these guys be athletes and hit it a long way.
I agree.
And if you want to make the greens firmer or let the rough, grow up a little bit, there's different ways to do it. But, I think that you don't want to put a glass ceiling too much on it, but you probably need to start looking at, down the road, what does it look like? I just don't think you can bring it back, I guess is what I'm saying.
I don't think so either. I think the tipping point has probably already occurred that fans want to see an aspect of these athletes being able to perform like that rather than have some type of governor on them to hold them back.
That's right.
From that standpoint. What was it like, though, on the tour and being married? And, what'd your wife think? Because, again, this is a challenge of a lifestyle in itself if you're on the road quite a bit.
It really is. That's I would say once you start having kids, it complicates it a little more. But my wife, we got married probably 4 years out of college. So she traveled quite a bit, actually, I would say from 2003 on. And then Charlie was born in 2006. And he traveled for probably 4 years. But as soon as the kids start getting to grade school age, it just becomes very complicated where
somebody has to stay at home.
Somebody's got to stay at home. So, quite honestly, in 2012, when I decided to step away from it, my kids were, what were they, like 6 and 3 at the time? So, that was a factor. It was, I realized that these 10 years were 10 years that we really weren't going to get back if we spent 30 weeks of the year on the road, and I had a couple bad years, and that was, not the factor, but, that was one of the factors. But, it's, one of the things that I miss is the travel. One of the things that I don't miss is the travel.
Of course.
I miss going to different places, but, packing up and moving and going through airports, it's just, it's I would say of all the non-glamorous parts of being a PGA Tour player, that would be definitely one of them. How
was it making that decision to put your golf clubs up
and not easy.
No longer pursue
it never is.
Your card.
And, I've probably done more reflection talking to other players that reach out to me about that transition through talking to them about it. But, I had, my last year on the PGA Tour was 2010. I think I had partial status in 11, but I'd played better on the web.com at that point, or Korn Ferry Tour. So kind of dedicated. I said, you know what, let's spend 2 years. Let's really rededicate ourselves to really practicing and doing the things that we need to do. And let's give it 2 years to see if we can get back out there. And, at the end of 2012, I had not played good that year and just really I didn't enjoy the process. And everybody loves
and what do you mean the process?
Everybody loves being on the stage and everybody loves competing. But, the 4 days and the time that you spend on TV trying to win a golf tournament is a little sliver of the process. And, practicing, all the things that you got to do to prepare and build, kind of incrementally build on each other to try to put yourself in a competitive, situation is just, I felt like I was beating my head against the wall. I was just practicing and working on my short game and doing all the things that I felt like, and my instructors and all the people that were around me felt like I needed to do, and I just wasn't getting any type of progress or results. And, at that age, at 38 years old, I said, look, if I'm going to have another career, this is a great time to look at it. This is time to do it. I don't want to be 45, 6, 7 years old playing the Korn Ferry Tour, beating my head against the wall for another 7 years, and now my kids are going to college, and, I just didn't.
Trying to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life.
And quite honestly, I've talked to a lot of younger players about this. It's an investment. You're investing in a business. Every year that you do this, and the problem is, as a kid, you play golf, You play college golf. If you have a good college career, the assumption is you're going to play professional golf. And if you play professional golf, the assumption is you're going to retire from professional golf. There's a distinct difference between retiring and quitting. If you retire, there's a press conference and there's no more working.
Yes.
So
you didn't have a press conference?
There's no press conference. So at the end of the day, you look at it and you go, well, every year you're investing $100,000, $150,000 into a business that, you've got to go perform. And at some point, you've got to answer to yourself as, would I make this investment in another business that was having the same results? And, at that time, I was really excited about it. To be quite honest with you, I probably didn't have a whole lot of conversation with my wife about it, just because
why not?
That puts her in a weird position. But if you go to her and you go, should I quit? And she says yes, then she's kind of given up on you. And if she says no,
you're like, you didn't believe in me.
Yeah, you didn't believe. It's kind of a catch-22, and that's really got to be something that you internally say this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, you have to make that decision.
Which at that age, it was the right thing to do, and it's proved to be absolutely the right decision.
How are you giving advice then to some of the guys that are reaching out to you?
Yeah, so I tell them when Kyle Thompson's a great example. So Kyle has come to work with us at Gallagher and has done great in his transition, but quite frankly, when he was on tour, he reached out to me 2 or 3 times. And I just said, look, I'm not telling you what to do, but this is kind of how I went through the process mentally, and this is how I kind of targeted the transition. And, I just said, basically, this is what I did. I'm not going to tell you that's what you should do, but, the biggest question is, how do you know when it's time to walk away? Mm-hmm. And what I told him was, look, when it's time, you'll know. And sometimes you kind of have to have a transition plan in place to kind of really say, all right, I'm comfortable putting that aside and going over here. But, it's a process. But you can talk to your wife about it. You can talk to people about it. But for you to take what you've done your whole life and walk away from it, you've got to be really comfortable with, this is what I want to do. And that's not to say that you might not do it and a year later change your mind. Did you have second thoughts? And that might be, I didn't. I really didn't.
So you were comfortable, kind of at peace. Or were you at peace, but you just knew you had another career?
I would say when people ask me, do you miss it? On a scale of 1 to 100 missing it, I would say I'm way closer to 1. I miss the people. I miss seeing some of my friends. But as far as the process is concerned, I don't miss it at all. So, you do. There's parts about it you miss. I do miss seeing different places, and I miss the people. I don't, people flip on the TV and they watch these guys trying to win major championships and do things, and I'm sitting here going, well, I beat that guy. But at the end of the day, I know what all of the things that go into them getting to that moment, and it is that moment is glamorous, but the rest of it can be very non-glamorous or unglamorous or whatever the term would be.
Was there a morning then? Did you wake up and said, that's it? Or what was the day that you said, that's it, I'm out?
I kind of knew. And I remember the Web.com Tour Championship in Jacksonville. I missed the cut. I birdied the last hole, so I birdied my last hole in competition ever. And
it's a fantastic way to finish.
I missed the cut by, I think, a shot or 2 or something like that. And then we had a long ride to the clubhouse, and I was just like, you know what? I'm done. That's it. I'm done. It was either go to Q school. It was either go to Q school and try to get my card back at the time, which I think that was the last year you could actually get your tour card. And, I was just like, I'm done. Drove home, talked to my agent for like 3 hours on the way home. I was like, what can I do? What should I do? And, got to, probably spent from Sawgrass to, I-26 kind of talking it through. And, everybody was a little bit confused because I really hadn't talked to anybody about it, but came home and told my wife and was like, look, I'm done. So I basically said, I'm going to spend 6 months talking to as many people as I can and figuring out, I always loved the business aspect of the tour. And I said, I'm going to talk to as many folks as I've, been in contact with, and I'm going to just talk things through and see what's out there. And it worked out great. And the commercial insurance business has been really good, and it's been a great transition. And Gallagher's just been an awesome platform for me to do what I was hoping I could do in 2012.
Yeah, so it was an easy transition for you then.
It was.
And so obviously there's this aspect of people, especially that make it to an elite level like you have, in terms of being defined by the sport that they play. I mean, so during that transition though, did you have times of, like, man, I'm a golfer, and now all of a sudden I'm not a golfer. I mean,
so
in terms of depression, and I'm not saying I don't want to be, melodramatic.
No.
Throw that out there.
No,
but
you're 100% spot on. I would say those times came kind of at the end of the competing. I think, I was really, I was not. You can't be in a good place to get to that decision, right? But I think once you make the decision and you commit to it, I think that it's almost kind of like it's kind of a breath of fresh air, if you will. I think you kind of look at it, daunting, yes. Unknowns, yes. But I think, and this is what I told Kyle, I think when you go through the process, or any of these young guys, I tell them, look, go through your Rolodex, go through your phone, and make a list of everybody you think would be worthwhile to have lunch with, go have a drink with, go have a cup of coffee with, and just talk to them. No agenda, just go talk to them. It serves two purposes. You go through the process of really understanding what people do, how they do it, what they do for a living, quite honestly, how much they make, so you can kind of get your arms wrapped around this is what the world looks like. I mean, we lived in a very sheltered environment on tour to where you're around the uber wealthy guys and these pro-ams and things like that, but you really don't know, what are you doing? What does your business look like? So it serves that purpose. But the other thing it serves is you start to get the word out that, look, I'm serious about this transition. I'm not having second thoughts, and this is what I'm doing. And then people start to talk, and then things kind of fall into place. If you decide to quit and just go hole up and sit in your room and pout about it, then no one's really going to know that you're A, really done, and B, you're looking to seek an opportunity. So, I think those are kind of how I viewed it. But, you gotta, make the decision. The great thing about golf was it's a week-to-week thing. You miss a cut, the next day's a new day, and you're looking towards the next week. I think the ability to kind of do that and compartmentalize successes and failures and learn from them helps a little bit in that transition, but obviously it's not easy. So there's a lot of thoughts that go through your head, but you kind of got to just, gear towards what's next. And, golf is so process driven that you kind of got to view that the same way.
Yeah. So how did sports allow you to have that ability to, look at a failure, learn from it, or look at success and learn from it? How did sports, because I think it's a unique situation because you learn from sports, but it's the sports or the sport that you play
100%.
That, puts you in that position.
No, you're 100%.
And it's an ironic situation of how they go hand in hand.
Right. I mean, golf's a little unique because of the week-to-week basis of it, but obviously you're working towards a more annual, long-term goal. But I think, as an athlete, if you can't, you look at, I guarantee you Trevor Lawrence and all the guys after they lost to LSU, you would think that would be the end of the world. That drove them to wake up the next day and want to go focus on the first game of the 2020 season. I think as an athlete, you have to do that. You can't really do anything at a high level unless you have the ability to do that and be process driven, because there's things you can control and things you can't control. And, I remember working with a sports psychologist and, I said, well, I need to do this and I need to do that. And he's like, you can't, and you can't control it. If you could control it, you win every week.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like if you could truly control it, you'd win every week.
You would.
That'd be the end of the
How
conversation.
easy would that be?
Yeah, but I think, as an athlete or, in anything, you've got to have the ability to compartmentalize that. I think sports is, we look at it when we're trying to hire folks, we love former athletes because they have that ability. They know failure. You're going to fail. Anybody can handle success, but if the really uber successful people, you look at the way they've handled failure. And that's, that's the keys to the whole thing.
And they've handled it multiple times.
That's right.
Failed in multiple things.
That's exactly right. And I think that's something that you just got to have the ability to realize. There's just things you can control and things you can't. And, you can control the input and the process, and that's really what you have to do, whether you're playing golf or, doing something in business.
That's right. Well, control the input. That's I hear that all the time from Dabo Sweeney. That's what he talks about quite a bit. Speaking of that, and you mentioned some of the Clemson football players, the last decade of Clemson football has just been at a level that obviously you and we never experienced while we were students at Clemson.
Nope.
It's just remarkable how the past 10 years of what it has done for the university in itself. What's your viewpoint in looking at the past 10 years for Clemson football?
I mean, I think there's one word, it's culture. I mean, really and truly, whether it's business, whether it's you're an athlete, whatever the case may be, really and truly, the one reason that we've been so successful, which has had a huge ripple effect across the university, is just Dabo's created culture. And, you know, he's created culture amongst us. He's created culture amongst his players, his donor base, people at the university, the athletic department. And I just think that's, you know, that is just, I mean, that's something that you can't put a number or it's just not tangible. But it's real.
It is real.
And it is, you know, the kids he's been, you know, my son went to football camp a couple summers and down there, and it's just, you see the kids that he is creating and the kids that he's grooming while they're some of the best student athletes in the world, and what they're doing and how they're interacting with our kids, it just makes you proud. So yeah, all the two national championships, all the things they've done, ACC championships, those are great. Those are really great. But I can tell you, just, you know, having had some small contact with it, it just makes you really proud to be a Clemson football fan.
It definitely does. And I never in a million years would have dreamed 2 national championships. I mean, let alone just one.
That's right.
You know, I mean, it's just amazing.
Right.
Now, were you at the national championship in Tampa? Did you make it to that trip?
I was at Tampa. Yeah, I was there, and I was in Phoenix too the year before, and I went.
I did make it to Phoenix.
I made the decision to not take my family, and we lost, and I realized why that happened.
You need family
because the next year I had my son and wife with me, and it was like, I told somebody, I said, I've never seen so many grown people crying in my life. It was just like, it was cool. And then obviously been to some of the games since then, and it was at LSU this year, which was a different story. But, you know, I think at the end of it.
But just even getting there again, I mean, it's just remarkable.
It's great.
Just the level that Clemson football has been.
It really is. And I think that, you know, I don't really think there's a whole lot of end in sight, to be honest with you. So I think that Dabo has created the building blocks of something that's very sustainable, and, you know, obviously you've had good recruiting classes, so it's going to be fun to watch. Hopefully we can get through this coronavirus deal and college football
and actually get able to play. I don't
know if we can handle it in the fall.
Yeah, the country right now, we'll see how the country reacts if there's no college football. Why has it been so important for you to give back to Clemson, though, especially there at the golf program and the facilities?
Yeah, I appreciate the question and appreciate you saying that. I think at the end of the day, you know, all of us kind of have this innate kind of sense that we just should always be kind of give back and stay in touch with the team. And you asked about kind of that transition. I mean, we had a fraternity past Clemson. And so we would do a lot of these pro-ams and these things for other charities around the country. And I went to Lucas and Jonathan, I guess in 2001 or 2, and said, why don't we do one of these for, you know, the Clemson program and South Carolina junior golf? Because those are two things that we all are very tangibly involved in the result of. And so, you know, I just think that it's been fun. It's been fun having a fundraiser that we call it a gathering, Tiger Golf Gathering, to bring guys back and just stay engaged. And I think that's, you know, I just think that's what, and Dabo's doing it as well with his, you know, all-in foundation ball and some of the things that One Clemson are doing. You know, they're keeping, you know, former student athletes engaged because, you know, they're always part of the family. So I think that's, you know, culture and family would be the 2 words that I would say are the reasons that I always want to give back and stay in touch with the program and do what I can.
Yeah, and how has Larry Penley been able to have, I mean, just the tenure that he's had? I mean, you talk about, I mean, he's a fixture.
Yeah,
all the way back to recruiting you.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Larry, I mean, he was a dad for all of us, our 4 or 5 years, 5 years in my situation there. But, you know, I think that, you know, Larry, directly, if you were to ask the question, the reason that I think Larry is so good at what he does is his approach is unlike a lot of these other coaches that, like we talked about with these junior players, really kind of put everybody in a box, whether it's technology or whatnot. Larry kind of lets every player develop on their own kind of timeline. And by that, I mean, he's not going to force you to do X, Y, or Z, but he's going to hold you accountable for your process. So, you know, everybody has instructors they work with. Everybody has different philosophies and ways we play the game. I would say that, you know, my team, my senior year, Joey Maxson, Jonathan Bird, Lucas Glover, John Engler, and myself, we were 5 really different people. If you were to look at the Oklahoma State team, they were 5 really similar players. They recruited players that really kind of fit into a certain box, and both were successful. But, I think that's why Larry has really had the success that he has is, he doesn't force you down a path, but he knows what each player needs to be successful, and he's going to hold you accountable.
Yeah. I think it's remarkable just how long he's been there and just the level that Clemson Golf it's always been a national name from a perspective. I mean, it's always been really good. So it's just amazing. I think there is a little bit of what you're talking about with Coach Sweeney culture. Seems to be a little bit of a similar thing with Coach Penley as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think he's done it, and I think he's created. I mean, I think the cool thing is the Clemson family is something that you're always a part of. I mean, it's one of those. Whether you go back and whether it's something at Clemson or something else where you go to a tournament, I mean, I felt like me and my family were always part of that family, and it's I love getting everyone back together and hearing 4 or 5 different generations of Clemson golfers tell different stories and kind of talk about that. But you do see that common thread that everybody talks about Larry with a high level of admiration and respect and appreciation, and I think that's that he's definitely the common thread that has kept that through and through since 1982, 1983.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
What was it like when you see one of your brothers at Clemson, Lucas Glover, win a major? Really
cool. Yeah, I mean, we were all very close when we played out there, and I think that's one of the things that obviously I wish it was me doing it, but you see these guys win, and it's really cool, and we're all very supportive of each other. And I mean, I think that other players on tour really kind of identified the fact that what we had was a little different than everyone else. I mean, you'd see us playing practice rounds together. You'd see us staying together. Like I said, Jonathan and I were rooming together at the tournament during 9/11. And, I think that was, we helped each other. If we were playing bad, I mean, we would go and look at each other's swings and give feedback because nobody's got more intel than someone that's played with you since college. So, I think it's cool. It's really neat, and I've enjoyed watching the next crop and the next crop of these guys come out and do what they're doing. And the fun thing is they're just all great kids. They're really, really good kids and people that you'd be wanting to represent the Clemson brand on tour.
That just goes back to that whole culture thing.
Yeah,
it definitely does. What was your favorite course to play?
Favorite course to play, I mean, best course or favorite course, I'd say favorite places I like to go. Love to play Charlotte, love to play Hilton Head. I would love to play Pebble Beach. I mean, those are all events. The FBR, the Phoenix, I always seem to play good in Phoenix, which was a fun event to play well at with all those people. But, those are kind of the places that obviously the home events, and then Pebble Beach is hard to beat. So those would be some of the ones.
It's going to be spectacular.
It really is, yeah. Pebble Beach is one of those places that, you rarely ever take a camera. That's back before cell phone cameras were kind of the thing, but you always had a camera in your bag playing Pebble for sure.
Was it true that there was a Tiger Woods effect on tour in terms of obviously crowds, but was there an aspect of people just looking at, oh my gosh, it's Tiger Woods?
No doubt. I mean, I think, he created a buzz and kind of a aura on tour that was unprecedented. I mean, really and truly. But, everybody asked why was Tiger so good? Well, directly, his short game was better than everyone else's. But the thing that Tiger really fed on is he knew it was like a movie. It's like when you watch a movie and you know what happens at the end of the movie. You've seen it 10 times, but you're still on the edge of your seat, or you're still like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? That's kind of how Tiger viewed every week. It was like Thursday, he knows the ending to the movie. So he knows he's going to win, which was important, number one. You knew he was going to win, which was really important, number two. But the most important thing was he knew that you knew he was going to win. So he knew that at some point, all he had to do was kind of go through the process Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And if he was close on Sunday, he had control of that situation, but he also knew he had control of your situation in a small aspect.
And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, you go look and you look back at the Bob Mays of the world and some of the guys that had a chance to beat him, and, obviously they had a chance, whether it be a playoff or Rocco Mediate at the U.S. Open, but, it's just in the back of your mind, you're like, have I seen this movie before? And I never really did that head-to-head with him, so I can't speak from personal knowledge, but, I mean, you felt it. I mean, it was real. It was it's kind of like Jordan, same kind of thing.
Yeah, the Jordan effect.
It's coming, it's coming. It's just a matter of when it's coming. But, athletes like that are obviously once in a multi-generation. So
that's right.
It was fun to be out there. I played the 2000 U.S. Open, and when he did what he did, and I played a few other majors when he was kind of in contention and was up near the top, and it was a completely different vibe.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have your back to the putting green, and if he walked out, you obviously knew he was there.
Wow.
I mean, it was a buzz. I would say the only two people that I've ever been around that really had that effect were Norman and Tiger.
Oh,
Norman had that a little bit too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wouldn't expect that, but I guess at the time, I mean, he had
an aura
there.
about him. And out of college, he brought me on as the first guy outside of himself to wear his clothing line on the PGA Tour my rookie year, and I had the opportunity to go down and play golf with him and do some stuff with him. And he has kind of that aura about him.
Yeah.
He definitely does, and I think he was really the only guy that I could think of other than Tiger that really kind of had that kind of wow it factor.
Yeah, there's obviously some guys that do, and you can, to your point, you can feel it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to describe. You can't.
I mean, if you go to a putting green or whenever they start back playing, if you go to a facility or a putting green where there's multiple players there, you go sit there all day and you see what happens when Tiger walks up. I mean, he's 44 years old, and it's still there.
It's still there.
And these young guys, you got to understand, all these young guys that are trying to beat him, they grew up idolizing him. So it's kind of, it's a fun. I hope he's competitive for a long time.
I do too, because I love seeing greatness.
Absolutely.
I want to see the continuation of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So wrapping up here, words of wisdom has always been a big thing for me, and obviously it sounds like you've been able to give advice to guys. And what about for you? Any type of mottos, phrases, quotes, or just life advice that means a lot to you?
I think my kids or anybody that I work with they could answer for me without me even saying this. But my two things are: be intentional and be aware. I think whether you're 10 years old or you're 80 years old, whether you're in business, whether you play golf, whatever the case may be intentional about what you do, your actions, and the things that you say, and all of those things, and be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of who's in the room. Be aware of body language. Be aware of other people's feelings. Be aware of who's sitting across the table. Be aware of, all kinds of whatever factors you can take them in and factor those into how you behave and react to things and act. And I think being intentional and be aware. I think if people did that, and especially kids, I mean, kids just, it's almost a learned trait now that as a kid, you've got to be aware of what's around you and be intentional about what you do and understand that there's consequences and reactions for all of your actions. So, I would say be intentional and be aware. Those are my two things. I
really like that, because I'm a big believer in being intentional, and to the point where I do a one word, for each year. Right. And a couple of years ago, it was intentional. Mm-hmm. Being intentional to do certain things. And then obviously, from an aware perspective, I mean, there's so many distractions these days.
That's right.
You definitely need to focus on that.
You can get in your own little bubble and get in your own hole, and you can get lost in what's actually going on around you. And I think, in the world we're in right now, I think it's really key to be aware of what you're doing and who you're around and how many people you're around. And, it's just, you start to extrapolate that out to everything in life, and it's like, I guess those are probably two things that we'd be well suited to adhere by.
Well, I'm aware that you're a better golfer than me, and now I'm even more jealous because of your beard. I cannot grow a beard. I love it.
I know.
It looks so good.
Everybody asked about my gray, and I was like, these are missed 3-footers, not the insurance business. These have been long since planted. I think it's on its last leg. I think you wear it very well.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
I appreciate it. Charles, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Greatly appreciate it.